Hey folks, welcome into NBA Weekly. I'm your host, Harris Rubenstein. Let's get right down to business, ladies and gentlemen. After the 2018 NBA Finals, David West alluded to some interesting locker room issues with the Golden State Warriors that might have cost them a title. After talking with sources around the situation with the Warriors directly, we have an inside look at the Warriors locker room and what could have derailed this Warriors title run as they attempted to win their second consecutive NBA title. So let's start with the first reported issues way back in February of 2016 when Draymond Green went after Steve Kerr in the locker room during halftime of their game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, this was not the first time we have heard something between Steve Kerr and Draymond Green. Going back to 2015 when the two had a very interesting relationship coming out of training camp. We'll bring that quote up here for you. Draymond Green said, quote, "From the start of training camp, Kerr hated me. That's no lie. He probably still hates me." Now, while that obviously had a more sarcastic tone to it, it would lead to some more interesting issues between Draymond Green and Steve Kerr. Notably, that locker room fight in Oklahoma City where the two simply just did not get along and were at each other's throats. A lot of curse words being thrown around, and especially outside the locker room where a police officer was prepared to go into the locker room and had his hand on his gun because he had no idea what he was supposed to do. We have the direct quote from ESPN's Lisa Salters from back in February 2016 saying, quote, "Officer had his hand on his weapon like he was trying to determine what he should do." The argument inside the locker room had gone to a boiling point where the two simply were at each other's throats. And Draymond Green and Steve Kerr have always had a very interesting relationship, and we will continue to talk about their relationship as we go through. So let's continue on here with Draymond Green and Steve Kerr. Another incident that the two faced was during their playoff run before the playoff run, where Steve Kerr and Draymond Green got into a fight on the sidelines where Draymond Green said, quote, "Mother effer, come sit me down." Now, this was during that same game in Oklahoma City, right before halftime, and what ended up launching the fight between the two. So already we're seeing a lot of fiery competitiveness from Draymond Green, him wanting to play and having some issues with either teammates or coaches. And as you'll see later as we go through this segment, our sources have alluded multiple times that Draymond Green has gotten into verbal battles with almost every single player on the Golden State Warriors team except for Steph Curry. And again, as you will know throughout this segment, Curry was notably absent from the Golden State Warriors team this year, and it might have actually had a hand in why Kevin Durant and Draymond Green had the issues that they ended up having. So let's go away from February 2016 and let's go into June of 2016 when the Warriors lost after being up 3-1 in the NBA Finals to LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. So obviously this created more problems inside the locker room, because the Warriors just figured, all right, we need another piece in order to get past LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. So after July 2016, when the Warriors lose the NBA Finals, Kevin Durant reportedly receives a call from Draymond Green to join the Warriors after their Game 7 loss. Now, this kind of phone call ended up having infamousy in NBA circles. This is what people called what allowed Kevin Durant to come to the Warriors and make sure that it was an okay thing for him to jump from the Oklahoma City Thunder, who, mind you, had just lost to the Golden State Warriors in the Western Conference Finals that year, and in order to jump to the Golden State Warriors. Now, that call has been refuted by multiple different people, including Kevin Durant himself in the next season, but we do know that in July of 2016, Kevin Durant did indeed sign a contract with the Golden State Warriors to join the team who obviously just lost the 3-1 lead in the NBA Finals to the Cavs. So Kevin Durant joins the Warriors July 2016 after that supposed phone call from Draymond Green after Game 7 of the 2016 NBA Finals. So once Kevin Durant joins the Warriors, things really start to get interesting with his relationship with Draymond Green. There were multiple reports of fights between the two, as well as them throwing a lot of expletives at each other, especially in the media, but our sources tell us that over the past 2 seasons, Kevin Durant and Draymond Green had multiple verbal tiffs over the past 2 years, and that the situation this year escalated heavily after Steph Curry went down with an injury in the middle of the season. And it also needs to be noted that Steph Curry was notably absent from the team this past season. And while our source did not go into exactly why Curry was absent from the team, it can be alluded to the fact that his wife was dealing with a pregnancy of their 3rd child, as well as those injuries that he was dealing with. So while it doesn't seem that Steph Curry had any sort of issues with Kevin Durant or Draymond Green, his absence was notable and might have led to the elevated, I should say, problems between Draymond Green and Kevin Durant this past season, to what we were being told were some pretty bad fights inside of that locker room. And as we've pointed out before, the two have had multiple issues in the past from the season prior. So let's continue on here with our timeline and go to June of 2017, when Kevin Durant denies the report that Draymond Green called him after the Game 7 loss. Now, that is a very interesting report to A, deny, and B, end up just talking about in the first place. This was coming after, or I should say after, the Warriors' Game 4 loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers in the 2017 NBA Finals. It came up in conversation asking, what is Kevin Durant's competitiveness going into Game 5, a decisive Game 5 it would end up being. And he claimed that the reason he came to the Warriors wasn't because of Draymond Green, was because he wanted to win an NBA title and knew that the Warriors were the best possible chance for him to do so. So already a very interesting conflict between Draymond Green and Kevin Durant as to who actually brought Durant to the Warriors. Seems to be a weird battle between ego and who wants credit for making the super team a legitimate possibility. And again, this does count as one of the multiple verbal tiffs between the two over the past 2 seasons. So again, like I said, to continue what I was saying before, Kevin Durant denies the report that Draymond Green called him after the Game 7 loss. Continuing on here with our timeline after June 2017, the Warriors win the NBA Finals and Durant wins the NBA Finals MVP, his first of what would end up being back-to-back Finals MVPs for Kevin Durant. So that is in June of 2017. Let's jump to October of 2017, going into this past season. Steve Kerr in October starts criticizing the Warriors' focus as they don't get off to as hot of a start as people thought they were going to, including losing the first game of the season to a revamped Houston Rockets team who had just brought on Chris Paul in the offseason. Now, going away from that in October of 2017, as we continue with our timeline here, in November of 2017, we had an interesting quote from Kevin Durant and him talking about his relationship with Draymond Green, saying, quote, "Draymond and I, we mother effed each other," alluding to their relationship in the locker room. Now, very interesting to hear two of them. And again, our sources have told us that Draymond Green and Kevin Durant are good friends off the court. So a lot of this can also be just general back and forth between two friends. However, this kind of language and just what you will see as we continue to go on here alludes to a much bigger issue between Draymond Green and Kevin Durant. It alludes to an issue that the two of their competitiveness levels and overall how they interact as two basketball players simply does not mix, and ended up causing a lot of the problems that we saw for the Golden State Warriors down the stretch last season. And that brings us to Steph Curry's injury in December of 2017, when he ended up missing his first of what would end up being about 36 games throughout the course of the 2017 and 2018 season. So with Steph Curry missing games, it obviously opens up a big-time leadership role inside of the locker room that we have the understanding that Draymond Green wanted Kevin Durant to fill. And as you will see here, our source tells us on Steph Curry, quote, "He was notably absent from the team last season." Now, we said this before and alluded to the fact that it may just be because, yes, he was injured. Yes, his wife was dealing with another pregnancy of their third child. The baby was recently born, another addition to the Curry family. But with Curry gone, the face of the franchise, as both Kevin Durant and Draymond Green have called Steph Curry in the past, is no longer with the team. So we're not going into March with no Steph Curry. March 23rd against the Atlanta Hawks is when Steph Curry sprains his MCL and is officially away from the Warriors for an extended period of time. This is when Kevin Durant and Draymond Green's fight started to escalate heavily as the Warriors in general started to go into a downward spiral to end the regular season. The team lost 10 of their final 17 games, including multiple to end the season, and that is when we saw this quote come up from one of our sources that Draymond Green simply does not mix with Durant's more laid-back leadership style. Now, this alludes to something that Kevin Durant has talked to before and one of the reasons why he came to the Golden State Warriors in the first place. When Kevin Durant came to the Warriors in 2017, they asked him about what his leadership role was going to be with the team. And he said, quote, going back to an article with ESPN back in 2017, that my leadership style is more of a laid-back kind of style, and it is not one that is out front. My leadership style is not something that is on the front facing of a team, but it is a let's come together and do this as a team. So it alludes to the fact that Kevin Durant left OKC because he did not want to be the number one guy or the leader of the franchise anymore, and came to the Warriors primarily because he knew that Steph Curry was already that guy. So with all things being considered, with Kevin Durant coming to the Warriors and with Curry's injury, Draymond Green expected Kevin Durant, as now the best player on the Golden State Warriors, to take a bigger leadership role. And as we extended throughout the playoffs, as Steph Curry was coming back through an injury, the two of them continued to fight and continued to have issues. The two had multiple verbal tiffs, and apparently it almost came to blows. We're talking fists here, people, between Kevin Durant and Draymond Green, but the two of them are still best buds off the court. So we know that they're friends off the court. We know that they are two very different competitors, but let's go into the playoffs for the Golden State Warriors this past year, and we go to May of 2018 when the Warriors face elimination versus the Houston Rockets. The first time that the Warriors had been faced with an elimination game since that 2016 finals when Kevin Durant joined the team. Now, the playoffs for the Warriors were very different than in years past. Obviously, Steph Curry was coming back from those injuries, but the Warriors looked vulnerable. They looked distracted. They were getting bullied off the ball by a Houston Rockets team that simply didn't have the same amount of talent that the Warriors did, but were able to take them to 7 games. And an argument has been made that if Chris Paul does not get injured in Game 5, the Warriors may never have went back to the NBA Finals in the first place. So we're at May of 2018 when the Warriors face elimination with the Houston Rockets. At this point, Steph Curry has rejoined the team. He is back in full stride, and the team has really started to get it going, but the Rockets simply have their number, and with their tough defense and their three-point shooting, bring them to 7 games before the Rockets obviously lose that 7th game after missing 27 consecutive three-point attempts. So we go to June of 2018 when the Warriors win their 2nd straight NBA Finals. Kevin Durant wins his back-to-back NBA Finals MVP. But this is when things really start to get interesting, because now we have David West, a noted veteran on the Warriors, come out and say that there were issues with the locker room, saying, quote, there are some things internally, when you guys find out about that shit, you'll trip, end quote. Now, we do have a source with the Warriors that has disputed that quote and saying that David West was simply messing with the media. However, we did also have a quote from Steve Kerr later that says that the team did go through issues last year, but it may not be blown out to what people says it was. And we have another quote coming here as well from David West with that quote about where things were internally. So our quote with the Golden State Warriors says as follows with this team, because again, people, as we go through this, you need to understand that the Warriors, who we contacted about this, deny all of this. The Warriors deny that this actually happened, and our source with the Warriors had a very interesting comment saying, quote, we don't get caught up in this stuff. This is not what I have personally witnessed. And we also have another source of maybe David West messing with the media in a New York Times article by Mark Stein, where he said, he told us, quote, I was messing with the media, made up a story about drama. I really had them going. So now we have David West backtracking on his overall quotes, despite the fact that there may have been some legitimate issues. What it seems that David West was backtracking on was the intensity of these problems and how close the Warriors actually got to collapsing from within. But that doesn't go away from the fact that this team had legitimate locker room issues. And as our sources put it, the Warriors locker room this past season was, quote, a real mess. So regardless of whether or not the Warriors source disputed this or David West backtracking on his initial quote, there does seem to be an issue between Kevin Durant and Draymond Green. And we have a quote coming up here from Steve Kerr on David West's comment that I alluded to previously.
I think more is being made of this than anything that actually happened. I mean, I think David is right. This was very difficult, and there were definitely some things that happened that never made it out to the press. But again, it wasn't that earth-shattering to me. This is just kind of normal for a team to go through some stuff during the season.
So let's get back to our timeline here and jump back to June of 2018 after the Warriors win their second straight NBA Finals. So let's go and stay in June and go into what we've seen so far from the Warriors this past offseason. So Draymond Green was offered an extension by the Golden State Warriors of 3 years and $72 million. That was turned down by Draymond Green because Draymond wants the Supermax. And if he gets an MVP, if he wins the MVP, wins the Defensive Player of the Year, or makes an All-Defense or All-NBA team next year, he will be eligible for the Supermax. And we know from previous reports that Draymond Green expects to get paid for his next extension, as he took less money to get Kevin Durant to Golden State initially. Now that Supermax next offseason for Draymond Green could be worth upwards of $190 to over $200 million for Draymond Green. So obviously he's going to turn down a $72 million contract extension. And mind you, whatever extension that he ends up accepting will not take hold until after the 2020 season when Draymond Green's current contract runs out. But we know that Draymond Green declined that 3-year, $72 million extension because he wants the Supermax. And then we have Kevin Durant accepting an extension from the Golden State Warriors in July of 2018 to stay with the team for at least another year and possibly 2 if he picks up his player option that they put on the other side of the deal. If you're wondering what kind of deal this is, LeBron James did this deal multiple times with the Cleveland Cavaliers. It is known as a 1-and-1, where a player is on the team for a year and has a player option to pick up next year. So a 2-year, $61.5 million deal to keep Kevin Durant in Golden State. However, what's interesting about this deal, it is not long-term in the slightest. This gives Kevin Durant the possibility of leaving for a new team in 2019. And considering what we have heard already about his issues with Draymond Green and how deep some of these leadership issues go and how long these tiffs have been going on, as reported, they've been getting into multiple verbal tiffs for 2 consecutive years now. It seems that Kevin Durant, especially after his quotes this offseason, is very much alluding to possibly leaving the Golden State Warriors next offseason and declining that player option. He was linked all summer long before he signed that extension with the Los Angeles Lakers and has proceeded to make some very interesting quotes about the Lakers this past offseason. So whether it is Draymond and Durant not getting along from their leadership abilities, whether it is they are simply 2 separate competitors, they have not mixed so far as 2 locker room entities. And now with Steph Curry being injured last season, we saw those issues come to a head. And for the first time in the Warriors' run, we saw them at the end of the regular season take a huge hit. They lost 10 of their last 17 games. And ladies and gentlemen, as I've said multiple times on both this program and multiple others, there's no such thing as coincidences in sports. If the Warriors are starting to lose games down the stretch when Steph Curry is gone, and now we are hearing issues between 2 of the biggest players on the team of Draymond Green and Kevin Durant, that tells us that a lot of those issues down the stretch were because of the fights between Kevin Durant and Draymond Green. So now where are we going forward with this? And as you see with our timeline, summer of 2019 coming up next offseason, Klay Thompson, hits free agency. Kevin Durant hits free agency, and then Draymond Green hits free agency in the summer of 2020. So this poses a lot of separate issues for the Golden State Warriors. We know that they already gave Steph Curry the Supermax couple off seasons ago to keep him with the Golden State Warriors for the rest of his career. But Klay Thompson has said multiple times that he will take a pay cut in order to stay with Golden State, and it seems that the rumors linking him to the Los Angeles Lakers are very overstated. But as of right now, it seems that Kevin Durant's time with the Golden State Warriors may very well be coming to an end. His comments about the Los Angeles Lakers and LeBron James's move to LA might be the most interesting quote of any player so far this summer, calling it the perfect move and saying that it was the best move of the offseason so far. So if Kevin Durant is tossing around compliments like that to a team that he was already linked to, and we know that LeBron James texted Kevin Durant about joining the Lakers this season, it makes you wonder, is this Kevin Durant's last season with the Golden State Warriors, and does it primarily have to do with his issues on and off the court with Draymond Green and their verbal tiffs? Now again, it needs to be pointed out from our sources that off the court, not involving basketball at all, Draymond Green and Kevin Durant remain best buds. So these are strictly from a competitiveness standpoint, has nothing to do with any personal issues. But again, when we're talking about high stakes basketball, millions of dollars, and the best team in the NBA, these problems come to a head very quickly. And when they do, they come out dramatically. And it sounds like from our sources that we almost got some physical altercations between Kevin Durant and Draymond Green over the past 2 seasons. So now where do we go forward with Draymond Green and his future, with the Golden State Warriors? So again, Draymond turns down that 3-year, $72 million extension because, again, he wants a Supermax the next offseason if he wins an MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, or makes the All-NBA or All-Defensive Team. And Draymond Green at this point has given up enough money on this current contract to get Kevin Durant on the team that he is not going to take a penny less than the most amount of money that he possibly can. But as we've seen throughout this whole situation with the Golden State Warriors, it seems that Draymond Green is the root of all of these issues. Whether it's fighting with Steve Kerr during a game in OKC in February of 2016, whether it's calling Kevin Durant after dropping a 3-1 finals lead against the Cleveland Cavaliers, whether it's getting to multiple verbal tiffs with Kevin Durant again over the past 2 seasons, and then again escalating those verbal tiffs after Steph Curry went down this past season, one has to wonder what interest the Warriors have in keeping Draymond Green on this team long term. Could we see the Warriors end up deciding between Draymond and Kevin Durant and the direction overall of this team? Now, I've made a point multiple times with the Warriors that I think they should take Draymond over Kevin Durant because Draymond has remained the alpha dog of this Golden State Warriors team throughout their entire title run. Steph Curry is the face of the franchise, but Draymond Green is the alpha of that locker room. He is the emotional heart of that team. He is the soul of what they bring to the table, and his defensive versatility is really what makes them an overall special team. A lot of teams can score the basketball at a high rate, but the Warriors' ability to stop the other team and make it as difficult as possible to catch up to their three-point shooting is what makes them so special, and Draymond Green is the centerpiece of that defensive unit. So if you're the Golden State Warriors, you have a big decision coming up in 2019. Do you give Kevin Durant a long-term contract extension, which maybe ruins your chances of keeping Draymond Green on your team for the rest of his career? Or do you let Kevin Durant walk and possibly join LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers to form the biggest rival that the Warriors will have ever faced in the Western Conference and give that Supermax or just a max contract overall to Draymond Green? That is a decision we will see come up this offseason when 2 of the biggest players on the Warriors are free agents in Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant, and Draymond Green demands a contract extension before he enters the final year of his current deal. But where does Klay Thompson fit into all this? Because we really haven't talked about him at all. Well, it needs to be noted that our sources here at Chat Sports tell us that Klay Thompson is just kind of an elusive dude. He's never really been a part of the social life of the team, and he's usually kept to himself and hangs out specifically with his crew, which involves his brother, a couple of high school buddies, and an old offensive lineman from Washington State. So Klay Thompson doesn't usually get involved in this drama. He will never usually be around the team socially. For instance, Klay Thompson took a huge vacation to Cabo. You didn't see him with any Golden State Warriors. You saw him with a couple of his friends and a bunch of women. No members of the Golden State Warriors were with him in Cabo. And I have a quote here from the Chat Sports source on Klay Thompson saying, quote, "They don't mess with Klay." So with Klay Thompson and the Golden State Warriors, he doesn't really fit into this too much. He really fits into it as his own separate entity. So whether or not Klay Thompson stays in Golden State has nothing to do with Kevin Durant or Draymond Green. The source of these locker room issues has been Draymond Green's ultra competitiveness and Kevin Durant's more laid-back style of leadership that came to a head this season when Steph Curry, the usual silent leader of this team, went down with an injury, and Draymond expected Kevin Durant to re-up and be that leader for the Warriors going forward. It did not work out that way, and the two feuded all season long, and it almost cost them a 4th title in 5 years and a 2nd consecutive NBA title. But that's what we have for you with the Warriors locker room mess. We will be bringing you back to this story as we go through the rest of the show here on NBA Weekly. I'm your host, Harris Rubenstein. You can follow me on Twitter at SportsDean. Go read our article about the Warriors locker room issues on chatsports.com. It is our main feature of the day. You can find it on Twitter at ChatSports or on my Twitter account at SportsDean. You will have more info on this as it continues to come in. But as of right now, that is what we know about the Warriors locker room issues.